Welcome back to part of our JDM video series, and today I have Josh Blyskal, who's one of the founding team members at Profound. He now leads special projects for them. And today we're just going to be talking about the changing organic landscape and growth marketing in the new era.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. Really appreciate being here. It's always a good time when we get to have a conversation because I know it's going to be super in depth and it's going to be really, really actionable.
Amazing. Yeah, and I think the big goal for me is I just want to have an opportunity and open an honest conversation with you about sort of the changing landscape of the marketing world right now. Everything has really been turned on its head since we started working with you as a Profound partner a couple years ago, and just helping some people navigate that change and that shift. And I want to just leave it open-ended and just sort of get your perspective on how the landscape right now is changing. Like, how would you explain it to somebody who is just entering the market or somebody who's been in the market for a long time and how they need to adjust to what we're seeing today?
Well, answer engine optimization has been around for about a year and a half, 2 years now. But that's the first change you really have to understand is that people are not looking through 10 blue links. They're not clicking through a bunch of links. They're not going to go to visit 10, 15 websites anymore if they're going to try to buy something. The new way of searching is through answer engines. Even in Google, like people always think, oh, is OpenAI or Google going to win an AI search? I think it's kind of irrelevant because search itself is going to be dictated by a chat interface, at least in the near to medium term. I don't know 50 years from now what search is going to be. Maybe it's all going to be Neuralink chips. I don't know. But what I do know is that everybody kind of has to get on board with the idea that, these chats and these responses are going to find your brand in any number of different situations because they're so contextual. And as a result, we have to now think about not only how we're being contextualized in ChatGPT, because that's AEO. That's like the first kind of problem is like, what does ChatGPT say about us? The second problem is how are these agents from ChatGPT going through our website? How are they finding our content? And how are they contextualizing us in all these different niche situations? And if I put it another way, it's like, what's the surface area of my brand? Second thing is how do we get things done that actually enables us to make those contextualizations, those answers better? And that's marketing engineering. I think those are the two big shifts right now in 2026. You're thinking about agents who are going out on behalf of these answer engines and finding things out, and marketing engineers who sit on the side of the brand to help the agents find out about their brands. So it's two sides of the same equation, agents and marketing engineers, both kind of using technology to make sure each other discovers and shows up well. It's very cool.
I think it is really exciting. I think it borrows a lot from the regular SEO tactics, but just in a different framework where we're just seeing this change from, the page of links to a broader conversation, but we're still optimizing for, crawl speed and allowing those agents to be able to crawl our website in the best way possible. And then figuring out how to make sure that we're making the best case for those agents to understand our business as best as possible. So I don't think it's a dramatic departure, but it is just a reshifting of the lens because the page of links is not long for this world because the chat workflow is just dominating. So it's been really interesting to just sort of watch it transition.
Dude, yeah. And don't forget about AI mode is totally different than anything else that we've seen thus far. I mean, the citations, thankfully, are not alien compared to Google search. But the way Google AI mode decides what to cite is totally different than PageRank. I mean, Google AI mode is going through, we can talk about it a little more granularly, but even the idea that it's the same as SEO is its own kind of tricky subject because I think the outcomes speak for themselves. They are relatively similar. If you're doing good SEO, you will get somewhere with your AEO. But if you're facing someone who's doing dedicated AEO work, you'll lose in those answer engine chats. It's that's the kind of tricky piece about it is I think there's an 80-20 here, but there are people who are doing all 100%.
Yeah, I think what I mean to say is they have similar foundations, but just different applications on different buildings on top of each. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But they have a lot of similar foundational pieces, and just being, the building on top of it is being put together differently.
Exactly.
But it is wildly different. Yeah, I think one of the big things that's been interesting to me is just sort of figuring out how to use agents on the marketer side as well to sort of shift or identify priorities is actually the way we're using it most effectively right now. But I'm curious, I know that Profound has a big agent marketplace. How have you seen agents really shift how people are using Profound today versus, the way they were doing it in, the early days or even before Profound was even really helping out?
Yeah. I think agents, with the way that agents can now do tasks, I mean, agents are really getting to the point where they can fully, create a blog post end to end. They can start to do these like tasks. If you asked an LLM in 2023, write me a blog
Yeah.
post, it might make you kind of a crappy draft, but you can now see, even in, a tool like Claude, it's going to research, it's going to go on the web, it's going to think a little bit. Maybe it pulls from some connectors, maybe it grabs some external data from some MCPs, and then maybe it starts drafting up a post. That's really interesting. Like that, we've never seen that before, and we've never seen it at such scale where every marketer in the world can now kind of grab onto that intelligence. So at least in Profound, the way we think about it is that, you've got kind of two different ways to get work done. You've got, deterministic workflows, which exist as like, these are the processes we like to run when we create content. These are the checks we like to have. These are the, the actual steps by which a blog post is created at, Acme Co, so-and-so company, insert whatever name you want there. That's your determinism where, all right, I have this process that I'm really invested in and I like. But the cooler part of it is the agent itself who can control that process, where I say, hey, find me, go in and analyze 200,000 lines of data. Go and pull me some opportunity that I wouldn't have known had existed in my data. At the same time, check Slack, check my granola, use connectors on my internal marketing team to figure out exactly what we're currently working on to make sure it's super relevant. And then build out something deterministic that I can actually get that job done, so I can trace through it and figure out where you went right or where you went wrong and let me hone it. I know that's a bit abstract, but I think what we're really trying to touch on is that there is this really elegant dance between the marketer and this intelligence that they go and send out to have tasks. Because the marketer knows, in my opinion, the marketer's tasteful about the output. I, as a marketer, know what the blog post should look like, what the deliverable needs to be. And basically, the agent is a service to me, where it's like, go figure out how it's done. You have these tools, you have these at your disposal. Do me a service and go build it together and let me know how you built it. And I want to be a judge if that, that plan that you created or that process got me to the point where I'm happy. And if it got me where I'm happy, then we've got a great thing going. I'm going to just enshrine that and use it 100 more times. And if we're not, fix that. And then we've got something I can enshrine.
I think that's interesting. I think you're sort of touching on something also that I find interesting, which is sort of like, how does AI play in the future of work? And I think right now the way that I'm thinking about it is similar to the way that you're thinking about it, is like, it is a force multiplier, not necessarily a force replacement. It allows for an individual who normally would be able to do X amount of work to be able to do X to the third amount of work, right? Like, it allows you to just like exponentially increase your output while maintaining similar quality. How do you see sort of like how things are trending on that front, like as things go? Is that sort of how you're thinking about it too? Like, yeah.
I mean, do developers use Cursor? I mean, do vibe coders use Claude Code? At all of these loops, you've got a human in the loop who instantiates, says, there's got to be a task getting done, and I'm the judge of your success, and let's go do this together. Let's knock this out. And the agent is all too happy to get it done. That is the magical loop right now in software. That's the magical loop in building. That is what every software that's interested and invested in its users as a software building for users is doing right now. And I think there's no different expectation around marketing. In fact, if I have to say something, I think marketers have been longing for this moment to have that level of intelligence riding along with them, and that frankly, it's overdue. So I'm excited to have, a tool that actually enables marketers to do incredible things, ship things, and build things from first principles. Yeah, absolutely. No reason to replace marketers. Marketers are the center of literally all of this.
Yeah. I think if anything, it's like that level of like adding a certain taste to everything also is like one of the big things that is going to be impactful as things go, is because there needs to be that human in the loop, making sure that like you're creating content that's worthy of being read by humans as well as by agents, right? So like, I completely agree. I think one of the things I also find really interesting in the organic space is, it used to be all about sort of getting to the first page of Google, and it was like really a long road to travel and very hard for a challenging brand to get in there and make the case to Google that they were as reliable as, the big 800-pound gorillas in their space. And I think the one thing that's been really interesting to me is like these agentic workflows are allowing more smaller teams to do more with the amount of human capital they have at their company, how many people they have at their company. So it's allowing challenger brands to enter in and play with larger brands on a more level footing, which I think has been really interesting to me. So like, I think one of the things that I'm looking forward to in this new world also is like being able to see challenger brands find ways to succeed here. And I'm sort of curious from your perspective also internally at Profound, how are you guys talking about the differences in organic marketing, organic growth marketing between, the large legacy brands versus the challenger brands, and who has the best chance to succeed here?
I think at the end of the day, the chances are very different. It's like, you're playing kind of two different games with the challenger brands versus the legacies. I mean, the legacies, often are playing defense with spaces that they already own and they own name associations with. And the legacy brands are looking for those tiny little, cracks in the armor where they can get in, kind of worm their way through with great content, with, buyer stories, with supporting evidence, information on Reddit. I mean, think about it like this, like the long tail query is never been more in vogue. I mean, this is the time. Queries are the longest tail that they've ever been. You're getting like, if this was traditional search, it would be the equivalent of every user going through and asking 5 search queries that are all long tail for each query that they actually have. And they're super niche and they're looking at tons of different results. I think what we're seeing right now is that for challenger brands, you have this opportunity to really extend the surface area of the competitive set. So, if you're making shoes, maybe you're making men's waterproof hiking trail running shoes. That's now an ownable category. If you track the fan outs there, you can pull back the fan outs for men's waterproof hiking and try to get fan outs that position you as the answer for any combination of those 3. Meanwhile, you have incumbents, trying to do men's running shoes or hiking shoes or trail running shoes, right? Like it's all at different levels, and it lets that ecosystem kind of exist at different levels where you'll see competitors really starting to carve out their niche in these LLMs and answer engines. Also because there really hasn't been that much content to support, especially, for some of these very specific topics that we're finally seeing as being viable, because agents can start creating content with, multiple different angles, multiple different perspectives. We can start contextualizing our products in different ways and being out there across that surface area. But I also think, like, when we're thinking about doing all that marketing, it kind of begs the question of what the search surface of the future is going to look like anyway. Like, if you follow it right now, the listicles, even though they're being, punished by Google, really, really still, like, it's so annoying too, because they're, the answer engines are putting us in tension with Google at the same time, where if you look at ChatGPT's citations, I don't know what to tell you. It's still predominantly, there's like 20% of all citations are still listicle based content, even though every marketer in the world is like, oh my God, please, I don't want to do any more of these listicles. ChatGPT is like listicles, only because that's what gives ChatGPT value. So I think that there's also this kind of breaking point we're going to see overall, where maybe the web isn't the right place to store all this information. If I have to write a blog post about, the best dog food for someone in Tampa Bay versus Atlanta, maybe this belongs actually like on an MCP that's queryable, not the open, web page web that is really designed for human browsers and blue link indexing.
It's interesting.
Just because I think there's now so many different users who want different things from these pages. And I mean users in terms of agentic users. You've got agents, you've got SEO, you've got human users, you've got, crawlers from these different LLM and answer engine models. You've got all these different ecosystem pieces now kind of demanding something from the web page. All's to say that, like, when we think about, this all came from big versus small brands. When we think about big versus small brands, it really comes down to trying to win the specific queries that you think are going to drive the most value, and you think there's an underserved amount of content around, or is your cornerstone query. I'll top it off. Tyler, I promise you I'll end this question with just like a simple point. We work with dozens of brands out there who have never been competitive for certain queries that maybe it's different regions, especially different regions, by the way. As you have fan outs in different languages or queries that you wouldn't have expected, we can do things with the query fan out that people wouldn't have expected, because the fan outs are so different from how humans search about the topic, that the fan out rephrases it in a way that puts your brand right at the top if you have access to the best data. The same thing for different regions. There's something like, we're doing this for a soap company. Soap company saw like 6% social citations in the US market. But the minute you go to the Mexican market, so you're asking questions in Spanish from an IP address in Mexico, the social media citation rate went to like 25%. Why? Because there's not good earned media out there. There's no one really writing articles covering this within the Mexican market in Spanish, and the fan outs are all in Spanish. But guess who's out there? People on TikTok, people making UGC, people talking about it. And so you have this opportunity in arbitrage as a brand. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about the difference in market and the difference in, the topography of the fan outs and all of that stuff. You can really, if you're really thinking intelligently about it, you could really get in there with some of these markets.
Yeah, and I think You said two things in that response that I really want to like come back to. One is sort of like creating a human version of the web versus like an agentic version of the web. And then, but like on the fan outs part, also like because the fan outs are so hyper specific and not necessarily how humans would always search, it's really easy for you to go in if you have the right data and you have the right access to information to figure out how to write content super specific for a handful of those fan outs. And then all of a sudden go from nothing to decent foothold in like, in a prompts category. And I think that's the one thing that's been really interesting to me to watch. And I think that's where, like, in my head, I see it as, and I think you made a good point on challenger brands. If you're niche and you're just focusing on just like driving your very small niche, there's a big opportunity there. And then it's even doubly more so because you can go in and look at these individual fan out queries and start writing content for each of those. Just go down the list and do that for every product category that you have. And then, legacy brands are spending all of their time trying to fight over, you know, men's shoes rather than men's waterproof trail running shoes. And I think it creates a really interesting opportunity for people who are like one ahead of the game, like really putting in effort now, because I think still like we've been doing this now as an agency for 2 years. And it still feels like when I audit people's accounts or talk to people, there's a lot of people who are not putting the right amount of emphasis here. So there's still like a lot of opportunity for challenger brands to come in because the playing field is like no longer level. Not everybody is using the best data. Not everybody's using the most recent techniques. And so there's a lot of opportunity for people to come in and sneak in and take traffic and attention, even when it's not necessarily traffic, but like enter into people's consideration sets when they otherwise wouldn't be able to if they're competing for the same 10 links on a Google
True.
SERP. So I think it's been really interesting to watch. So
It's
yeah, I
true.
love that part.
If you have time for one more, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and then that was just I wanted to like just say that as a follow up to like what you were talking about fan outs and like I also wanted to readdress you were talking about sort of you think it'd be interesting if there was like a future where there is a world where there's information and context hosted on an MCP that's intended for machines versus like a public version of the web that's for human interaction. Like I actually think that's really interesting because I think like right now one of the things that's happening is like people are creating these listicles because it's the easiest way for the machines and the agents to understand information, but not necessarily like the most engaging or interesting content for a human to read. And like I know that like in our space, a lot of agencies are creating listicles about the top 10 B2B SaaS agencies. And it's like, okay, you're putting yourself number one, of course. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I just feel like it's not a great like end user experience, but right now it's just what wins in AEO. So it's like what people are doing. But how do you see the future of the web shifting? Do you think that it really will be like one version for agents, one version for humans, or?
Yeah, I do have to. I do have to because there's just so much surface area that the answer is being demanded. You have to think about what would make Claude or ChatGPT's answers as insane or as high quality as possible. And part
Yeah.
of that comes from the amount of specificity you can offer. Now, obviously, I think that before I go into this answer, I'm going to caveat with the thing that makes this the most unworkable, which is like, it's so important to be honest about this, which is that, frankly, if there becomes a second web for agents, how do we trust what's on it? Like if I'm just, pumping content out there, then it's just
Yeah.
context. It's just like buckets of context. But I think that in the same way that we have PageRank, you could have the same argument that like, well, how do we trust anything on the web? If anyone could just pump anything out on the web. So it kind of is like, it's a solved but unsolved problem. And I think that agents make it harder, by the way, to solve because you can just kind of go at a scale that you've never been able to before. But yeah, I do think like when you look at like, for example, if I was going to ask Claude, I need a men's leather belt for less than $40 and I need it delivered before Wednesday and it needs to be 100% leather and dark brown. What Claude is going to try to do right now is Claude is going to try to literally run at this like glass wall at full speed, trying to scrape Macy's page. And it's probably going to bounce right off the wall. Boom, just make a huge echoing sound, right? Because Claude has no ability to see the JavaScript and Claude can't see the live prices and Claude's not going to be able to know what Macy's inventory is. So it's going to try Nordstrom, same problem. It's going to try, an aggregator. It's going to try like Google Shopping, whatever. It's going to try all these different sources. It's not going to be able to access that information. But if you're thinking about Claude being able to be asked that same question and say, you know what, let me go see where I can find that information out. And it pulls from its own index of MCPs, an index that if you kind of close your eyes and think about it, looks like rank 1 on this index, Macy's MCP. Look at all, deals and for clothing, apparel, accessories, and more, Nordstrom MCP. Maybe it's like retailmcp.com, which is just like a person who has
Yeah.
scraped all these other MCPs, who's already making a buck doing this. And then you've got, others, and you've got other groups, and you've got other people, and you've got Vogue, and you've got, fashion websites, whatever. You have 10 MCPs. Claude's like, you know what? I'm going to write a query over to the Macy's MCP. Macy's MCP, find me men's leather belts, less than $40 for delivery. Here's Josh's address, dark brown. What have you got for me? And Macy's is going to put back a JSON object saying, here's the listings, here's the URL, here's the listing, here's the colorways. We have it in these sizes. This is the price with the shipping. This is what's included with New York tax. This is what he's going to pay overall. Print it out, and Claude's going to be like, cool, I'm going to go check the other MCP. I'm going to check the other one. Cool. Hey, Josh, here's what I found. Boom, boom, boom. Now, that doesn't exist on the surface web, that doesn't exist on the surface web, and it only exists in answer engines for things like these integrations. My favorite illustrative example is that you can book a ride with Uber on ChatGPT. It's painful, Tyler. I have done it. It sucks, but you can do it technically, and you don't do it by having ChatGPT scrape the front end of Uber and thumb through the app and click the buttons. Obviously, these are servers talking to servers, which is what it's going to be in the future. I don't think there's a place for the content that answer engines need outside of some of these MCPs in certain cases. Now, for definitional things, what is a CRM? Or do people do practitioners like HubSpot or Salesforce more? I think you go to the open web. You go to the open web because there's information and facts. But I think when you're trying to find products and you want to know about shopping and you're looking for the most recent data and things like that, even people folks like G2 could be looking at this and say, we should have an MCP for all these business details, for all the reviews. All this stuff should be pullable and deterministic. If we wanted someone to query about Profound, I want someone to know all the best stats about Profound up to date with all the reviews up to date. So yeah, I do think it's going to bifurcate. I think it actually frees us up from this kind of, AEO prison that we're in a little bit, where, like I said, it's like so much is being demanded of these web pages. You've got to please, the human. You've got to please the CMO. You got to please the agent. You got to please the scrape of the agent. It's just a kind of a nightmare. And I think we can have more creative websites, frankly, that won't require us to be doing so much extra work on top of it. Like, the website has become this very load-bearing, structure. Maybe it doesn't have to be. I don't know. Of course, who knows? The infrastructure isn't there yet, but we shall see.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the only way we can go about it too, because I think we are running into a space where we're right now writing content for agents rather than writing it for humans, which then goes on our website, which is dedicated for humans, which is not really the best use case of that time and energy, right?
It's a huge
But I think this is the whole concept of building out the marketing engineer and figuring out the best way to get these things out in front of the people and agents as possible. And I wanted to address that too, because Profound has really been leading at the forefront of building out the concept of what a marketing engineer is. And I wanted to just get sort of an idea from you, because I know you've been a real thought leader on this front, and sort of understand from your perspective, with all of these massive changes and all these potential changes to come, what do you think the most important skills to be an elite marketing engineer are today? And how is that different than just being an elite marketer? How do things transition to being a marketing engineer? And then what are the skills that make you elite in that category?
I think you have to have first of all, the hard skill that you can have, which is, relatively, it's getting more and more common these days, is the ability to work with agents and the ability to see your work as a system of marketing. The biggest transition right now is transitioning from thinking, you're doing this blog post, it's a one-off thing, you're going to post it. Where does that knowledge go? Where does the taste go? Where does that process go? If we're thinking about this infrastructure where agents are hitting our brands from every single angle, we need to be able to meet agents at those points with the right marketing information. So from a marketing engineering perspective, you need to have the ability to understand what goes into creating a piece of content, to be able to create pieces of content at scale, to be able to create context at scale for these agents to find you in the right way. Like I said, we have to divorce ourselves from this, the MCP will take care of it. Right now, we're all living on the web, and it's very crowded, very, very crowded. It is like a stuffed subway train. I'm in Brooklyn. I know what a stuffed subway train looks like. And I'll tell you, that's how the web feels right now. And, building that content requires someone who thinks about the actual load-bearing process of content creation. What kind of research are we going to pull from at each stage? What are the checks and balances in my workflow? Instead of going on Claude and writing a one-off blog post and copy pasting that into Google Docs and then sending that off to an editor, do we need to do, a a huge analysis of all of our content pieces, learning about all the H1s, H2s, learning what fan outs we want them to rank for, doing a huge refresh for 2026 at scale, thinking about the latest stats, doing research programmatically, where we can programmatically research the topic of any article, and then it'll give me drafts of some of the updates I can make for this year. All doing it very high quality, right? Obviously, the marketer is
Yeah.
in that process, part and parcel with the taste. But when you would be doing this anyway as a marketer. These are the tasks you'd be undertaking, but now you're defining them. You're writing a Magna Carta, a constitution of how your marketing gets done, and you're applying that to agents and saying, you're now going to follow my constitution that I've set out with these specific processes and these things, and I'm going to be checking in on you to make sure that's the case. That level of scale and that ability to work across teams to get that done is what I think will turn marketing from, this function that frankly doesn't have an engineering layer yet, doesn't have a layer where people are marrying, data with their taste at scale hundreds of times a day, to an area that basically will have its own group of people that are like software engineers or developers, people who can, scale their work, like data engineers, software engineers. Imagine a software engineer that has to write every single thing for the first time, every single product for the first time, or every single product they make has to run individually for every user. There's no scale. Every time I press refresh on the web, I get the same web page because it works at scale. It's the same way that it should work for marketing.
Yeah. No, and I think, yeah, no, that was a great answer. And I think like one of the things that's been really interesting for us as an agency is just like like you said, there's all these things that we were going to do regularly that we now have like agents that can do. And the areas where it's filling the biggest gaps for us have been like competitor research, like crawling the web to understand like what our competitors are doing when they're doing it and what they're seeing success with. Like we would otherwise be doing that on our own, just like when we remember to, or like when we have like set a reminder to, and now we have agents actively telling us when things change on our competitors' websites and making suggestions on what we should do next. And then also just like the content briefing system has been absolutely changed because it allows us to just, rather than ideate around like 3 to 5 ideas, have like 15 to 20 that are easily created as a result of like the agentic workflows that we have built on the researching side. So like it just allows for, the work that you would otherwise do, like you said, but just dramatically accelerated. And I think that's been the key difference for us. And then one of the other things you said there too that I think was like sneaky important is there's this big difference right now between context and content. Like right now, content is what has always been getting you written to get ranked. And the big thing that's like written for like the human side of the web, and context is the part for the agentic side, right? But like they're all still living in content right now. And I think that's what's making the webs feel like overwhelmingly crowded and noisy at this point, is like context and content should probably not be the same thing, and probably won't be for much longer. But like right now they are. And I think it's made for the web has felt like a weird place for a little bit here.
Exactly. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Awesome. So I wanted to just ask, like, I have a couple last questions. We sort of went out of order here, but like, do you have an idea, like, what do you think? So given all that context that we've just like established here, like, where do you see the agentic like landscape headed? Is it just like we've talked about sort of like how the web will likely change? How do you see the workflows changing over time now that like marketing engineer is like a concept that's coming to prominence, but still is in its infancy? So like, how do you see where we are today versus where you think we'll be in a year comparing to one another?
It's a great question. In short, I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be workflows of agents instead of these like deterministic kind of like fully drag and drop, web scrape to boom, to boom, to boom, very defined workflows. I think I'm going to have a node that if I'm a marketing engineer, I'm working on creating these agents that exist in a node. And I tell them, your job is to research and scrape the web. You have these tools available. You can use Exa, you can use Perplexity, you can use Google Sheets to store information. You can use Python to run analyses and run math. You can do this and do this and do this. And you can use this skill, which I've spent 100 hours really tinkering on. It's like 25,000 characters long. It's like a really detailed skill. And it's my research skill, and it defines the process by which you're allowed to research and all the checks and balances. And then I can have that go to a writer, and the writer has another group of skills and another group of tools. But instead of like, needing the marketer to say, yes, this exact thing needs to happen in this exact particular beep, beep, beep kind of way, maybe it is a bit wider of an aperture where you have an orchestrator sitting on top saying, my job is to be, the voice of the marketer. My job is to be tasteful, and I'm going to only give this to the marketer for their final approval once it fulfills my idea of what good looks like. And I think that's where we're kind of going, where I'm going to give series of agents and orchestrators large scale project like tasks and tell them to work on it until it's complete enough for my review, rather than having to manage every single deliverable by hand. I think we get to the point where these agents can behave somewhat like low level employees, like associates, junior employees, folks that can actually seek out and develop something over time and strategize and think back to the results and track KPIs. We're seeing that already with connectors. So yeah, I think in short, agentic workflows of agents are the next level for us here, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting to me is I think you're exactly right. And the thing that's like I have sort of struggled with in thinking about like what the future of work looks like is like as you start to replace a lot of that, like quote unquote like lower level employee work, like the stuff that you use to build the building blocks that create a senior employee are also the things that are likely to be replaced. And I think it'll be interesting to see just like there's also going to be a fundamental difference in how you train and build talent in the future as well, which I think is like there's going to be this huge ripple effect in all of this stuff. But I think you're right, where it's just going to be switching from like having individual agents for individual parts of your role to having teams of agents for whole sections of things,
Yes.
and then having it come together as sort of an orchestrator rather than, a tactician is the transition that we're seeing already, and like that I imagine we just see accelerated really
Yeah,
dramatically.
that's my perspective.
No, that's amazing. Awesome. This has been like a really amazing conversation. I actually, one last question I want to ask is like, what are the best use cases you've seen so far of building these sorts of workflows? How have you seen like best in class work done, either through like the Profound Agent Marketplace or just like agents in general for
Yeah.
marketing engineers?
Oh my goodness. Some of the best in class work that's getting done right now. I think it's actually pretty interesting to say that it's not content. I think content's great, but I think the content world is so saturated. The interesting thing is all the inputs that feed content have needed so much love for so long. Like you talked about it
Yeah.
yourself. Your experience is exactly what my experience is that the coolest things are the competitive. Who wants to look at 2,000 blog posts from my competitors to do research? It's like the coolest stuff is the inhuman stuff. Every human being
Hmm.
wants to write the cool blog post. Every person wants to be deeply involved in the fun stuff. And I agree. Why not? Like we're marketers, we
Yeah.
relish the opportunity to tell our audience a message. But why do we have to do all the competitive work that gets us to the point where we already have the buy-in? Let's get the research done. Let's learn some different perspectives and then let's go sell it. Let's go talk about it. Let's go be excited. Let's
Yeah.
go be people. Let's go appeal to other people. So the best in class work right now, I've seen some insane deep research stuff that people have done within Profound workflows. And obviously, there's a billion agentic platforms. I've seen that stuff everywhere too. People learning about every piece of competitor content they're doing on a 15-minute cadence. People, scheduling across different competitors, learning about pricing changes. People doing, like analyst relations work. Love that stuff. Big shout out to Spotlight AR. They're using agents right on the cutting edge to do analyst relations and more. There are so many different things around the work that, a marketer does that, if you're developing a martech platform, you don't realize are really the true pain points around creating the deliverable that most people don't talk about. And I think
Yeah.
part of the journey at Profound is really finding and elevating and creating systems that make those pain points melt away to get to the core of what's human about marketing and the core of where agents can actually be that force multiplier. So yeah, I'm excited. It's been it's always a pleasure to build for this audience, and it's always a pleasure to build with agents too, because I think it's democratizing this new form of intelligence.
Yeah. No, and I think that's what's really been like impressive and super powerful for us as an agency is just being able to like replace humans on the inhuman stuff as how you said it. Like that is perfect because there's a lot of like boring, not fun, but has to get done kind of work. And now we can do that without it being boring and fun. And we can do it at like a scale that we never were able to do before. And that's, I think,
Yes,
the big key difference is like adding, instead of like looking at the last 10 blog posts that a competitor has written, we can go look at the last 2,000. You know what I mean? So it's been really amazing and has been just like absolutely an amazing force multiplier and allowed us to really like level up our game, but still like keeping humans involved in the writing part because humans are still writing for humans for the most part.
for sure.
And I think that's been the thing that's been really exciting for us, man. Well, amazing. I really, Josh, this has been such a cool conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and
Always a pleasure,
I'm
man.
sure we'll talk again soon.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
Amazing. Thank you so much.